Now, we've talked about this before, but the mainstream media is starting to pick up on this, guys. Bryan Kohberger, I think they should just release him because for some reason, nobody's paying attention to the other two fucking blood samples from two other men in the house. I'm JB Gunner, this is Crime Time. Let's get into it.
Bring it back.
Look, man, I don't give a fuck if you are a guilter, not a guilter. I don't give a shit. At the end of the day, if you don't find it problematic that 3 DNAs were at the house that day and only one's got ran through CODIS, only one's DNA got fucked with at all, if you cannot openly admit that that's problematic, then you are somebody that we shouldn't take seriously. I don't give a shit. If Gray Hughes or any of these people don't believe that all 3 of those DNAs should have been tested, if you don't believe that, then no one should take you seriously. We're going to get into this story. Before we do, though, I want to say thank you to everybody that supports the channel. Hell, any of my channels, regardless of platform, regardless of way that you do it, whether it's Cash App, Patreon, Venmo, PayPal. Truth is, guys, I couldn't have done this for 19 years now on all these different channels, uncensored, if it wasn't for you, the Gun Squad. I love you very much. And to the rest of you, if you find my content valuable, feel free to hit the links down there. Support the channel. Join the Gun Squad today. Let's go ahead and get into all this, man. I'm just going to go ahead and break it down. We're just going to go ahead and get right into it. We're going to look at Howard Blum and this article on him, and then we're going to go listen to Bumfield and see what that stupid bitch has got to say. I'm fucking fired up. Howard Blum, Idaho college murder suspect Bryan Kohberger may walk free over bombshell DNA evidence, but years of investigation have convinced me he did it. This sack of shit. Over the past 2.5 years, I've spent weeks, this is his article, in that small college town where 4 students were viciously stabbed to death in the middle of the night. I've spoken to local Moscow, Idaho law enforcement with firsthand knowledge of the grim events. I've questioned FBI agents knowledgeable about the Bureau's exhaustive hunt to find the killer. And I've traveled to Hardscrabble, Pennsylvania communities where the suspect, Bryan Kohberger, was raised and schooled. After conducting 300 interviews and poring over my piles of documents, I am convinced that Kohberger, now 30, is guilty of those murders of those kids. But my opinion, of course, means little to a judge and jury. And as the criminal case against Kohberger has moved through a series of combative legal hearings before a trial scheduled to start this August, several stunning courtroom revelations have left me thinking about the previously unthinkable. Kohberger may walk, and he should walk. He fucking should walk. It's not that I believe that the recovering heroin addict turned criminology student is innocent, he goes on to write. It's that he may, in my mind, have committed the nearly perfect crime. Ann Taylor, Kohberger's lead defense attorney last month, shared startling new information that will be, I suspect, the foundation of the trial defense. She revealed that blood from a still unknown male had been found on the stair handwell of the murder house at 1122 King Road. In addition, blood from another still unknown male had been found on a glove outside the home. Is this why you demolished the house? Is this why you demolished the house? Just a question. Those other 2 blood samples don't pique a motherfucker's interest? Man, you can't make this shit up. You cannot make this shit up. Let's scroll on down. Blood, unknown visitors. The residence was a party house, as we've said. People were coming and going all of the time. One could reasonably expect the handrail to be covered in fingerprints, but blood? And why would the blood be on a glove? This is a little bit too much blood in this house, don't you think? Even Ada County District Judge Stephen Hippler was caught up in this new mystery. Does this suggest the potential of other people involved? Hippler wondered out loud at the hearing last month. That doesn't exclude Kohberger. he was quick to add, but the unknown blood did raise the possibility that there might have been accomplices in the murder. Taylor, though, was prepared with her own theory. Perhaps she offered one of the two unknown males whose blood was found had planted Kohberger's DNA at the scene. It was an odd place to plant. Think about it. That knife sheath, we've all agreed for a long time, was in an odd place. Let's continue. It is a hypothesis, tentative, still inchoate. I actually don't know that word. Inchoate, that will no doubt be fleshed out this summer in a case that is suddenly more open than shut. Indeed, at the crux of the case against Kohberger's DNA, smaller than a speck of floating dust, found on the knife sheath, discovered laying adjacent to the bloody body of Maddie Mogan. The technician, goddamn, winter, I hate this shit. Anyway, let me continue. The technicians at the FBI crime lab in Quantico, Virginia, were able to upload this particle of DNA to a genetic database that led them to a currently unknown member of the Kohberger family, who had shared their DNA information with an online ancestry website, which they're not allowed to use. Only it has turned out that the FBI lab team had been too zealous in their rush to identify a suspect. It was revealed in court last month that they had accessed two online databases that explicitly prohibit law enforcement from using their inventories. They're not supposed to do it. It was a violation of the terms of service the sites offered their customers, as well as the Justice Department policy. It's a violation of Justice Department policy. And the Kohberger defense team is determined to make this unprofessional behavior into something more. They want to use it as a wedge to pry open the entire case against him. Kohberger's Fourth Amendment right to privacy, absolutely, they assert had been violated. And as a tainted consequence, all the subsequent searches that followed in the investigative wake, most significantly DNA taken from a swab after his arrest, should be thrown out, and I agree completely. Judge Hitler listened to this eye-catching thesis and didn't rule out the possibility of holding a normal Franks hearing later this month. Named after Jerome Franks, the victimized defendant in the 1978 landmark Supreme Court case, the proceeding would consider whether law enforcement had knowingly included false information in the affidavits that convinced magistrates to issue search warrants. If these searches are ruled illegal, the trial of Kohberger crumbles. That's it. For nearly all the evidence that remains is circumstantial. All circumstantial. Kohberger's car, the prosecution alleges, was in the neighborhood the night of the house at the approximate time of the killings. His cell phone had been suspiciously shut off for that period, which doesn't prove anything. Let's see here. A surviving roommate had seen a man dressed in black wearing a partial mask in the house who largely resembled Kohberger. But remember, she said she didn't remember a lot of shit. When he was arrested at his parents' home across the country in Pennsylvania, the state police found him wearing kitchen gloves and sorting his personal garbage into plastic bags as if to hide his genetic identity. The DNA on the snap of the knife sheath established that it belonged to a member of Kohberger's family. And most incriminating, the DNA check from a cheek swab taken after Kohberger's arrest was a direct match to the genetic material on the knife sheath. None of that amounts to a smoking gun. None of it. Actually, none of it does. On the other hand, there was no blood from any of the four victims found on Kohberger, his clothes, his car, or in his off-campus apartment. There was no blood anywhere. None. No DNA, no nothing. This had been a murder scene where torrents of blood had gushed, breaching the walls of the house and branding the exterior with jagged red rivulets. How could he stay so clean? That's the question. No connection between Kohberger and any of the victims has ever been established. There was, in resolute fact, no proof he had ever been in that house on King Road where the victims lived. The suggestion that he stalked any of them, his lawyer asserted, was an outright lie, and there's no proof that he did. There is no direct link between Kohberger and a murder weapon. The K-bar knife used in the killings was never found. It was never confirmed that Kohberger's car had parked by the victim's house. In all the surveillance camera videos of a white car traveling by King Road at the time of the murders, there was not a single photograph that showed Kohberger sitting behind the wheel, or an image that recorded his license plate. The cell phone location of analysis of Kohberger's travels at the time of the murder and subsequent morning were inconclusive. It showed he was within a 10-mile radius of the murder house. Not being in the vicinity, but being in the vicinity is not the same thing as being in the location. Finally, it was revealed in court last month that the eyewitness identification was a lot less incriminating than the police had previously maintained. According to Kohberger's team, the witness in subsequent interviews had conceded that she had a lot to drink that night and didn't know if this was real or if her mind was playing tricks on her. When police showed her a photo of Kohberger just before his arrest, she failed to identify him as the intruder. She's got to go. You got to throw out that witness. You got to throw this whole thing out. In short, without the DNA evidence, Kohberger, if he was the murderer, may have committed the perfect crime. That's coming from Howard Blum. Explosive new evidence that could see Bryan Kohberger walk free. Man, I wonder what old Bumfield has to say about the situation. I'm curious. Let's check it out.
Can you help Bryan and me with something here? We were all just a little kind of flummoxed by the did not meet the criteria. The two other blood samples, the one from the railing in the house, don't know if it's first or second floor, basement or middle floor, or third floor, or the blood in the glove found outside. What does that mean when the prosecutors might say it didn't meet the criteria to feed it into CODIS to try to match it up?
Tell us more.
Well, good to be back with you, Ashley. Hello, Bryan. So here's the deal. CODIS users have to adhere to some strict eligibility guidelines before you can enter a profile. And that's because back when Congress enacted the law back in 1994 called the DNA Act, it recognized that the creation of this database would contain genetic data. So they wanted to ensure that only the genetic information from criminal perpetrators was entered. And so the evidence here must be linked to the perpetrator. So, for example, if you have a murder that takes place at a party house, that's what you correctly describe this house as.
That's right. Oh, so because there's no definitive proof that the blood was linked to the murder, they didn't even bother running it. They said, well, man, shit. All this blood everywhere? Not Kohberger's blood, by the way. All this blood everywhere, that couldn't possibly have anything to do with a quadruple stabbing homicide. Not at all.
Investigators could seize empty beer bottles. And if there's a DNA profile on the beer bottles and the investigators want to send it up to CODIS, they cannot. It's ineligible because although it could be linked to a perpetrator, it could just as easily be linked to someone who's uninvolved. So they want to protect those who are uninvolved. So whether it's beer bottles or whether it's gloves found outside or handrails inside the house, which
so the DNA on the knife sheet, that was exempt, though.
May or may not be linked to the floor where the murders occurred. It's the same thing. They're not eligible to be entered into CODIS.
Ain't this a bitch?
It's so bizarre. I just assumed if there was blood on a piece of evidence anywhere in a house where 4 murders happened, you want to find out who those people are.
That's the smartest thing this dumb bitch Bumfield has said this whole case, this entire 2 years plus.
And then clear them. But it's shocking that CODIS has that kind of strict requirement. Bizarre. And I get it. Having DNA, a speck of it on a knife sheath, that's a whole other ballgame, right? That's the murder weapon.
Different.
How about this other issue?
All kinds of different. How about this
other issue that Bryan and I were just talking about? And that is that Ann Taylor says, and I'll repeat it because the wording matters here. She said, police found absolutely no connection between Kohberger and anybody from 1122 King. There's no blood in his car. He wasn't connected to that house, to the people in that house. No blood in his car, but she doesn't say there was no blood in his apartment. No blood on his things. She stopped at car. Can we take her at face value that she meant all of that when she said no connection?
No connection means no connection, Bumfield, you dumb bitch. If there was blood in his house from the victims, that means there's a connection, you dumb bitch.
Connection to the people in that house?
Ann Taylor is a
Jesus
savvy lawyer.
Christ.
When she says car, she means car. And I point you to the excellent argument from one counselor, Ashley Banfield, who said that that car wasn't found until 6 weeks after the murders. 6 weeks, a long time for someone who is a doctoral student, who's used to researching this kind of stuff, to know how to get rid of evidence, to wash the car, to be able to sanitize all the
These people are
insides of the
nut
car.
jobs.
And
Nut
that's,
jobs.
I think that's what happened. I think this guy, to me, clearly did it. And he took great pains to try to dispose of all the evidence.
Kohberger
And in the
didn't do
end,
shit.
They have his DNA on the nice sheath.
So
that's
what?
the biggest evidence here. They also have him driving the car that was used. They also have
don't
him
know
using
that,
his
though.
cell phone before the murders to scope it out. Although the cell
We
phone
don't
was turned
know
off
that,
during
though.
the murders. How interesting
I hope Kohberger sues all these motherfuckers. News Nation for sure.
that the only time his cell phone was turned off was right during the murders. He's an unlucky guy, just like his alibi, where he said he was searching for stars, looking at
They didn't say he was searching for stars. He didn't say he was stargazing on the night of the murders. That's not what the alibi said.
stars at that time of night. No witnesses, of course. He was just out there stargazing in his hardtop Hyundai.
That's not
in the
what it
middle
said.
of winter. Okay.
That's not what it said.
Yeah, those are all the things that jurors have to decide, is that reasonable? And sometimes they can get over it when it's just one thing that they have to leap over. But if there's a whole chain of weirdo stuff that they're meant to just gobble up, they
Like all the weirdo shit that the police have done in this case.
start to, get sick over it. And that gut tells them too many coincidences, too many silly stories, too many coincidences that I'm not.
I don't want a man to be sentenced to death because somebody's gut is rumbling. Eat a motherfucking burger and it'll stop rumbling.
prepared to let go of. Real quickly, only a couple seconds left, Ehrenberg, but I do have to ask you about the fruit of the poisonous tree business.
Yeah.
Do you think we're going to have one of those Franks hearings to determine if the way the FBI went into the public databases to get that genealogy linked to Kohberger's dad was not fair, according to the
It's not
courts, and
fair.
thus everything after it gets tossed in the garbage, which is kind of like the entire case almost.
Yeah.
Ashley, who has the privacy interest here? Whose rights are being harmed? Perhaps his distant relative, whose DNA should not have been accessed. But
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. It's against the DOJ policy to do it.
Kohberger have an interest in his distant relative's DNA?
Of course.
No. He
Of course
has no
he does. Of
argument
course
here,
he
no
does.
claim. Dismissed. Not the case, by the way.
No,
His argument will be dismissed.
No, you just said it, motherfucker.
The case. That's going to trial.
No, it's good. You just
So do you
said it,
think there's actually going to
motherfucker.
be a Franks hearing to decide that? Or is the judge just going to say, this doesn't even deserve a Franks hearing, let's just move on?
Nah, we needed to have a
In
hearing.
a high-profile case where he's facing the death penalty, they'll give him a Franks hearing. They'll give him every benefit of the doubt. But in the end, he ain't winning it.
He ain't winning it.
I wonder if that'll delay things. I mean, look,
Why ain't that Bryan motherfucker talking?
we got a lot to fit in before July, August beginning. So thanks for
That's what she said. Ladies and gentlemen, you got to drop this case, man. If you're not going to test them other DNAs, the other blood DNAs, and you got to drop this case. I don't give a fuck if he's guilty, not. I don't even care. And anybody that is honestly and fairly looking at this knows if there's two other blood samples in that house, you have to test that. You have to. This is not an option. There's blood samples, not just DNA, blood DNA in the house where 4 people were murdered. That is unknown, unidentified. I got a suggestion. Maybe they shouldn't be unidentified. And then maybe you'll find your real killer. But it's not Bryan Kohberger. I'm JB Gunner. This is Crime Time. If you like what I do here and you find my content valuable, feel free to hit the links down below. Support the channel. Yeah, they got to drop this case. They got to drop this case.